Thank you and welcome to our webinar today, the Infor SunSystems V1 user webinar, which is all about a piece of technology called V1, which is a document management and document capture technology that's integrated to Infor SunSystems. So just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. We would love for you to submit any questions you have along the way, and we'll dedicate some time at the end to answer them. So in your control panel, the GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see that there's a section in there where you can write down your questions and we'll answer. And if we don't get through all of them, we'll certainly follow up with you one-on-one with them. We are recording this session, which means that it will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards, and we'll send you a link. That way you can re-watch it or share it amongst your colleagues that weren't able to attend the webinar today. So our presenters today are myself, obviously, and Kitty Shu. So Kitty is one of our senior consultants. I'm sure many of you, particularly our Melbourne-based customers on the webinar today, will know Kitty, but she has an extensive 15+ years of experience with SunSystems and also is one of our V1 consultants and is going to run through the demonstration today. So we've got a bit of an introduction around what V1 is and some of the challenges you don't want to try and solve with V1. And then we're going to, most importantly, run a demonstration and then some questions and answers at the end. We're also going to run a couple of poll questions throughout the session today just to get some interaction and to give you some insight into other organisations on the webinar today, some of their answers. On this webinar is specifically designed for our customers that have iPOS, so our web procurement module iPOS. And the reason why you've got iPOS is digitise and to automate much of your procurement process across your organisation. So some of these process challenges that we see very commonly across the board, or any process, not just around AP, is to, things like lower cost and save time and importantly, reduce that end of month processing time. Now, given that you have iPOS, I'd hope that you've gone much of the way to addressing some of these process challenges, specifically around procurement and AP, but these process challenges are exactly what V1 will address for you. A quick poll. So I've got our first poll question of the day just to get you thinking across your lunchtime. How much time per day on average, and best guess, are spent for AP people or finance people keying, filing, retrieving and querying invoices per person? If you could just select the most relevant answer to you, that would be great, and we'll share the answers so that you can get a bit of an insight into, I guess, a cohort of organisations on the webinar today. While we're waiting for that, I didn't get the opportunity at the start just to give you a quick summary of what V1 is. Now, many of you might have attended our seminar events that we ran last month where we introduced V1 for the first time. So V1 is a document management and document capture technology which comes integrated to SunSystems. So here are our answers. So where we've got good outcomes here, and that's what we would expect from an iPOS user community, where the biggest group of people is sort of around the 2 hours per day, which is still, a fair amount of time if you add that up. So with V1, we're aiming to help you improve that even further. So the objective of the session today is to give you an understanding of the benefit of automating specifically for iPOS users, the invoicing processing component of that, and also the document storage. So it further streamlines the process of procurement in your organisation, gives people better access to the information, further reduces your costs, and frees up even more of that time. If we took the 2 hours on average per day, if we could even free up an hour of that, it gives staff the opportunity to be doing other things that add, more value to the organisation. So why V1? Why are we working with V1? There's lots of document management and document capture products in the marketplace. Some of you might have reviewed some of them in the past. One of the reasons is, well, the most important reason is has a strategic partnership, not just with us, but with Infor. And Infor are the author of your core product, SunSystems. So it's important we have alignment there in terms of the development and roadmap alignment with Infor and also all the different SunSystems versions. But the other important reason for V1 is they're very mature products. They've been around a long time and they've been integrating and working with SunSystems and more recently with iPOS for quite some time. So it's a mature, proven product. I'm going to fly through these because I'm conscious of time, but there's ultimately, I guess, 10 challenges and 10 solutions that we're looking for when we're looking to automate an entire procurement process. And now with iPOS, we're looking at these kinds of things. We want to be able to If there's an invoice that comes in that doesn't have a purchase order number on it and isn't expected to, we don't want to have to do any data entry. If we have a no purchase order policy, so if there's no purchase order number on the invoice, we're not going to pay it. We want the system just to email back to supplier automatically, and we don't want someone to manually do that. We want to automate our purchase order matching, so invoice to purchase order matching. We want to notify users if they haven't received their orders. We want to be able to deal with multiple invoices, so one purchase order but multiple invoices. We want to be able to add lines. When we automate this and digitise this, we obviously want to be able to store and view invoices and search for them later on. Importantly though, we also want to be able to add other documents as well along the way. So they're the 10, I guess, challenges that we have around iPOS and automating it completely, and these are the solutions that V1 can provide. So in terms of what does iPOS do and what does V1 do? Well, we know that iPOS should be managing your requisitions, your purchase orders, invoice entry and approvals. But what V1 does is address that bit of manual gap that would currently exist with your processing of those supplier invoices. So automating the document scanning and capturing all the details from the invoice digitally, doing the matching automatically, and also doing all the storage and searching automatically for you. So that's V1's role on the right there in your procurement process where you're using iPOS. So this is what it's going to look like. So you're going to receive the invoices either in paper format or you're going to have them emailed as PDF, which is actually the best practice. They'll be scanned if they were manual invoices. And where the magic happens here is the capturing of the document. So it uses OCR technology to scan your invoices in and recognise specific pieces of information on that invoice. It then does the matching to the purchase order in iPOS for you, stores the document so that it can be safely stored, securely stored and retrieved later. And then, as you would already have in place with iPOS, all the automatic postings into SunSystems. We're going to hand over to Kitty now, and she's going to show you a demonstration of V1, and she's going to touch on some of those 10 solutions in that earlier slide. Thanks, Kitty.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to go back to that previous slide here. The demonstration today that I'm going to focusing on is to show you the capture component of V1. Rebecca explained that there were two ways, whether that's a scanned paper invoice that we nominate to store into a particular file folder or invoices emailed to a specific email address. That's where it all goes to that capture module for the document capture to happen. And then I'll explain the matching of the PO example and also how the documents are archived and the posting happen to Sun. Okay. So what I'm going to do, using an example, a few examples of the invoices that I've actually placed them, scanned them, and I've actually placed them in a specific folder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them to a nominated folder where the capture module will read. Because it's actually processing at real time, so if I just go open up the capture component, as you can see, they sort of slowly moving away from there because it's actually moving into the document queue here. So now you can see the view being processed. If I refresh it, it's actually coming through here for the validations. The configuration here is actually set to check every 15 seconds for that particular folder and check if there's invoice coming in. If we were to set it up through email, that would be a particular email nominated mailbox that we would specify the invoices to go into. As you're aware with the SunSystems setup, that's probably going to be a setup that we will say if it's a nominated folder or a mailbox that will be set up per business unit in that case. All right, so I've got all the 7 examples coming through now. It's all sitting in my to be checked queue, okay? So I've got a few that have an OK status. So let me start it with one of these to show you. So what it's going to bring up is the scan invoice together with the fields that is captured through this process by the OCR technology. So if you have a look at here, firstly, it actually checks against the ABN number. So I've got ABN number set up, SunSystems in supply setup. It actually validates the ABN number. It also checks if it's a valid supplier that we've set up in Sun. and then some standard features as the graphing, the descriptions. Here, it's picking up the invoice number. As you can see, it's actually highlighted in light green on my scan invoice. Date, it will read any date format and convert it into the format that iPOS would take. Okay, and most importantly, the PO number that is supplied on the invoice, that is the PO number that we process in iPOS. And you can see from the bottom here, I've got 4 lines in the grid. That's actually coming from iPOS. Okay, so it actually picks up all the receipted PO lines from iPOS, and I can check against the values. So the total net valued, so it looks at the total invoice, the tax, and then the gross. So there is a check in the system to make sure the gross is the sum of net and tax value here, and I can see all the lines here. Okay, so this one all good to go. I click accept. What it's going to do is it's going to process this, and if I refresh this again, it actually removes that from my to be checked queue, and you can see that it's in the exported queue. What is done there is actually imported the invoice into iPOS. So a few things that's done. It has created the invoice in iPOS. It has performed the matching, invoice matching, and it would have stored the documents at once. So these were the steps that we'll probably normally do manually in iPOS, and that's all done within this document capture screen now. I didn't actually quite explain when I get into this screen. On this screen, I can actually have a quick summary of the information. As you can see that it picks up the supplier code. If I go along to the right, it actually picks up all the fields that it picked up from the scan invoice, like invoice number, date, the type of the invoice. So whether it's a purchase order matching or whether it's a direct invoice, it all comes up here. And if it's a PO, if it's got PO number, it will actually all show up here. Okay, so you've got some information there before you actually drill down to the details and validate the details from there. So AP would normally come in here to do all the validations instead of all the manual keying in that they would normally do within iPOS. Okay, so I'm just going to accept the other two, which is the same, so it will go through the queue and get into the system. Okay, then I'm going to go in here to review 2 of the errors here with you. Okay, so these 2 here, document ID 244 and 245, 2 separate invoices, but they both have the same error. So we're expecting a purchase order because we specify that as an invoice matching PO type, but then there is no order number on it. So as you can see on the scanned, on the invoice PDF, that's actually blank. So we're saying that now it actually tells you here on the red box that there's a validation error. It's blank for a purchase POP invoice. So that's expecting a purchase order number there for this particular invoice type. And therefore it's saying the amount. And you can see from the grid line here, because there wasn't a PO number, I couldn't retrieve the information from iPOS. So what we can do from here is we say, okay, we need further check depending on your company policy. So we can put this on hold. And then you can say, okay, there is purchase order missing. So you can put it on the on hold queue and come back to review it later. What you can also do before I do this step, there is actually an email button there. So it is possible to configure with a setup to say, okay, if there's no PO number, we actually send this back to the supplier to say, hey, you haven't actually provided us with the PO number. We can't actually pay this invoice. So that would actually send the email together with a copy of this invoice back to the supplier based on the email address that we set up in Sun, and then request them to provide a PO number. So then what we can do here is we say, okay, send out the email, and this is a PO missing. I'm going to move that to the on hold queue, and as you can see, it's now sitting there. Okay, so we know that we've got something there that are waiting for actions on it. So until we hear back from the supplier, we're not going to pay that particular invoice. Okay. So that was the same example for this one. Now I'm going to look at this particular example. It's complaining about the value not adding up. So let's have a look. Okay, so this particular invoice for order 668, we've got an invoice for $214.50 or $195 net. Okay, so what's happening is picked up from PO number 668 from iPOS, but it's actually found two lines, and it's totaling with a totaling of $500 net here. So if I click on that, you can see it actually provides an error message here. Okay, so it's saying that the total value is 500, but the invoice value is 195. It's out of balance. So what we're saying, okay, this is a part invoice of the entire order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this line, okay, and then I'll just go check. Okay, so now it's checking that particular line. It still says, okay, it doesn't balance, but then it's removed the other line. So what I'm going to do is then I can change the value here, $195 instead, check. Okay, so now the error disappears and say, okay, happy with that. So what it's going to do when I process this, it's going to process 195 net to iPOS. So leaving my other lines plus the remaining value on the first line to be an open, so we still have an open receipted order awaiting for the next invoice to come in. Okay, so I'm going to accept this. Okay, so if I refresh this, this would disappear. So firstly, it moved to the to be exported queue, and then once it checks to the validation check, it moved to the exported. So it's now all in iPOS. So just the final one that I wanted to show you for this particular example. This is a direct invoice, so without purchase order. So if I bring that up, it's actually picked that up as the PO number, which is not right because it's not PO number. So I'm just going to clear that out. Okay, and say check. Okay, that's fine because we shouldn't have a PO number on it. And you can actually see from the grid, it's actually trying to pick up some details and created the line details for us because it's a direct invoice. So it's filling as much details as possible, but you can see that the analysis code are still blank. So what would happen is this will send to iPOS as an XML invoice, and it will await for the user to fix it up from there. So I'm just going to go accept here. Okay. Right. Okay. So wait for it. So leave that one there because it's the same example as the others. So I've got 5 that's gone in to iPOS. 4 of them are PO matching. There was one that's a direct invoice. So I'm just going to take you to iPOS now. Okay, so if I look at invoice entry. Okay, firstly, so I've got a few invoice numbers there. If I just have a look at one of this. Okay, so this is the one, just go to show you the line audit. So it's been matched up with the line amount, so it's been approved automatically. I just check this. This is related to order 668. Okay. So come back to here. If I want to view the scan invoice, just go view PDF. This actually brings up the scan invoice in V1 in the document management system. This is where it actually stores all the invoices documents. So within V1, so that's the copy there. Okay, so drill down. So apart from here, we can also drill down from Sun or Q&A, Excel or Executive with some configuration we set up with the button, or through Q&A using a user-defined output. We can also create the same link, so you can actually drill down from there. Okay, so what I'm going to take you to have a look now, just on the last bit of the document management within V1. I'm just going to close that. Leave that one there. It's in the V1 document management. So there are a few components. So all the documents are stored in Smart Retrieve. Okay, so we had a look at how we can actually drill down from iPOS, or to click on the shortcut to view the invoice from there, or we can come into here, Smart Retrieve, looking at all the iPOS invoices and credit note, and I can quickly. So there's a number of search criteria here just to make it easier for the search. If I just going to search for all the things, so I've been using the DAM business unit for this demonstration. If I go show results, it actually picks up the 5 invoices that I processed through the capture module before. So I can also view it from here. So that's just to make it easier that you can search on any invoices here. Sorry, just click externally. So what we can do from here, I was going to say, it's apart from viewing the invoice here, say if you wanted to attach other supporting documents for this invoice, you can do that through the Smart Deposit. So you can actually attach other documents here by browsing to a folder. As an example, I'll just pick up a file, then it actually comes up with a preview here. And then you can put in the invoice number for the one that we were looking at. Sorry, I didn't capture that invoice number. And then all we have to do is just to save these documents there, and it will save as an additional document to the original invoice. So that will then become available to view when you go back to Smart Retrieve. So if we added any documents through Smart Deposit, when you do a search through here, let's go back to the same, show it here. When you view the documents, then it will list all the additional documents together with the original invoice from here. Sorry, I just realized I haven't finished off with my direct invoice example. So that Fuji Xerox example, it would have come into iPOS, sitting in my XML queue, waiting for me to fix up the error. So if I just show you here, if I click View Errors, okay. So firstly, it tells me that, okay, that invoice numbers already exist. If I just put that in, save, and then there's further, and then if I just process this, and this is going to tell me I've got more errors because I haven't actually filled in any of the analysis code. Okay, so that's in here. Remember, when I scan the invoice, we wouldn't have those coding on normally have those coding informations on the invoice. So this is where we come in here to pick up the code and fill that in. Okay, just going to tidy that up. Save. Okay, so if I go process and submit, if I now go back to my invoices here, you can see that the status has changed to submitted. So it's going through the normal approval process, which would have been the same if we were to enter this invoice manually, because being a direct invoice, it will always go through the approval process. So from here, it just takes you to the same step as how you normally do in iPOS. Again, you can also view the invoice from here by clicking on the View PDF. Takes you directly to Smart Retrieve, and then bring up this invoice so you can actually view it from here. Okay, so I'll just quickly recap on the validation rules that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so check the valid ABN number, checks if file is valid, adding any secondary ID if it's required. Some simple checks, I mean, that's just depending on the rules, can be set up, but the one that I was looking at in my example, it actually checks if the invoice date is older than 90 days, or if it's like, if it has a future day, then it's going to reject as well. It checks the duplicate documents in the system, so we've seen that happen in the XML, but if it's one that's already been processed in iPOS, that would also give us an error in the capture module. It checks the currency as well, so see if the currency code is set up in Sun. Some simple checks, amount balancing, which I went through that before, to make sure that the net amount plus the GST amount actually adds up to the gross amount. It has some inbuilt smart about date conversion, so it will read US format or any day format in words, and it will convert into the required format that iPOS will take. It also does the invoice 9 matching outstanding to a receipted PO lines, and if it's one that is a part invoice, then it will do the same as if we were to do in iPOS, that will leave the, say, the second line or any remaining value opened for another invoice coming to do the matching. So I'm now just going to hand it back to Rebecca.
Thank you, Kitty. So hopefully you can see from the demonstration that Kitty has gone through that you've got more of an opportunity on top of the benefits that you've gotten from iPOS to further save time of your AP and finance team, or anyone that's involved with processing supplier invoices and matching, and allowing them to spend more time on other work besides capturing, processing manual steps. So you'll see the demonstration here obviously was very much heavily reliant on the key things around iPOS. So iPOS managed all the approvals engine, and we assumed that you've got everything going through iPOS. But equally, V1 can work directly with SunSystems as well. So keep that in mind. You've got the ability to attach documents into Sun that aren't related to procurement. So if you've got pictures of assets or those kinds of things, you've got that opportunity. So it is a full document management and capture solution. Today was very much focused around using it as part of the iPOS process. All right, so we do have some questions. There's quite a number of them, so we're going to need to address some of these with you one-on-one through your account management team. So we'll certainly download them all and get them answered, send them back to you. There is one, a few that we might tackle now in the last couple of minutes, if that's all right, Kitty. One is, are the business rules configurable, in particular the return of an invoice to a supplier? Is that something you can automate to do automatically, or can you just decide to do it one-on-one? What are the options there, Kitty?
Yeah, so that we can set it up as a rule to go through the initial validation check. If it's something like it's missing supply details, we haven't got it in the system, or if it's missing PO number, then certainly we can set it up to send the email back to the suppliers automatically without going through checks on every single of them. But I suppose it also depends on the invoice as well. So, I mean, part of this is each suppliers have their own set of invoice layout. So V1 gets better to sort of understand or to capture all the fields from a particular invoice. So if it's some obvious field with the missing PO number, I mean, that's certainly something we can set it up automatically. But it's not something that obvious that it may still require manual check before we send that off.
Yeah, and the idea with OCR is you train it. So as supplier invoices come in and are missing fields, you train it to what it needs to look for, and then the next time that supplier invoice comes in, that part should be automated. Here's one. Is there a way in V1 to set the cost codes, etc.? For example, the division or department code when you're actually in the V1 process at the start there, Kitty?
I would need to confirm that. I think it can be done sort of at a purchase order type level, like if it's a generic coding for that particular type. But I need to confirm whether we can actually set it up in a more specific, like at a supplier level and all that. So I will check that and come back for an answer. And
how does V1 know that a supplier invoice should have a purchase order on it. Is that set at SunSystems level, or how does that work?
Yes, it is. So in SunSystem, at a supplier level, we actually determine if that particular supplier is a purchase order. So it's like we define it as I think I had an example with a POP, purchase order. It's always a purchase order type. These suppliers, we will always have a purchase order defined for this supplier. So that's how it determines based on the supplier setting. It's through an account analysis card.
All right, well, we've gone over by 1 minute, but we'll just slip one more in quickly. Is the GST field calculated, or is it read, I guess?
It is calculated. So it is set up in V1 to calculate as a 10% based on it's also based on the GST code as well. We define a system. So we read from the invoice whether there's a 10% there. If it is, then yeah, it's also validate the calculations.
Okay, great. We will address all the other questions. There was quite a few sent through, so thank you for those, and you'll get responses from us. Please talk to your account management team, so your inside account manager or your customer success manager if you'd like any further information, or if you're unsure of who they are, then I'm more than happy for you to give me a call on my mobile there or email address. Thank you for your time. We hope it's been beneficial, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.